Welcome to the Corporate Detox Podcast. I'm your host, Amanda McWhorter. I'm a corporate dropout, recovering people pleaser and perfectionist turned burnout recovery coach. If you are sick of the corporate roller coaster ride and ready to step into a life you love, this is the podcast for you. Hey there, welcome back to the Corporate Detox Podcast. I'm your host, Amanda McWhorter, and for today's episode, I am joined once again by my good friend, Noelle Morgan. Noelle has actually been on our podcast a few times, and I always love having her on here for some good, honest, raw conversation about her time in corporate and all of our experiences together. And I hope that you grab a lot of great information from today's episode. And what a great week to have her on, as this week is International Women's Day on March 8th, 2023. And I am just so excited to be able to bring you guys more content this week from some total badass women, and focus our conversations around the corporate detox movement and burnout and tips and tricks that will definitely help you on your own corporate detox journey. So let me get started with a little bit about Noelle. Noelle Morgan is a certified trauma-informed life and leadership coach. She's based in the UK, and she works one-on-one with female leaders across the globe to navigate their personal and corporate worlds so they can speak up and show up with confidence. Prior to this, Noelle spent 20 years in corporate HR for different global pharmaceutical firms, and lived and worked in both the US and the UK. She left the corporate world in 2017 when she realized that the mask that she had been hiding behind for so many years no longer fit who she was becoming. So with that, Noelle, it is always such a pleasure to have you on the podcast. Let's jump in. Okay, Noelle, my love, thank you for coming back on the podcast. I love our little series that we're doing, that's for sure. So today I wanted to focus our conversation around something that you had said in our very first interview. And it has really stuck with me, and I think it would be really good to deep dive into that today if you're comfortable. But you had mentioned that when you were in corporate, you felt like you were wearing this mask. And when you discovered that that mask that you were wearing no longer fit who you were becoming, oh my gosh, I resonated with that so much. And it was like a mind-blowing moment for me, and I'm sure for some of the listeners as well. So I do want to deep dive into that today and have more conversation, if you are willing.
Absolutely. My favorite topic. I love talking about, the masks that we wear, and well remembered, because that was our very, very first conversation, wasn't it? That's brilliant.
Yes.
I mean, for me, so I entered corporate probably, over 25 years ago. And at that time, I entered corporate, as I'm sure many of the listeners can resonate, with a lot of baggage. I think we've mentioned before, my childhood was very abusive. So I came into the corporate environment with a lot of shame, a lot of messages of not good enough. My voice was not important. My opinions were not important. I was all about not taking up space and looking after everyone else. So basically, my nervous system was kind of wired for protection and survival. I was like a little tight coil. In I go to corporate, and believe it or not, because of the stuff that I was coming already in with, the mask that I was already wearing, the glove fitted so easily. Because if you remember, kind of like old style HR, and this is like, and it's changed a lot now, and for the better. Old style HR was around kind of like that governance, that policy and procedures, you know, the right behaviors, the right values, the rules, a bit of policing. So I had to be, you know, I had to be in my head, you know, very, very prim and proper, to kind of like embody all of that HR was about. So as soon as I put the suit on, I was adding another layer to an already kind of like, it's when you put like on, you know, two face masks. When they say spread it on thinly, because you know, it helps your skin, and you put a bit more on in the hope that it would clear your skin even better. I had this, on went the HR suit, and the mask was like bolted onto me. Because it was for me, it was self-protection. I had a role to fill in HR. I had to walk the talk and speak appropriately, and embody the behaviors and the values, and make sure everyone was behaving. And it allowed me to actually hide, because no one could see anything about me as an individual, because I was so tightly hidden. So at the start, it was perfect. It was a perfectly fitting glove. And I loved wearing the mask because it doubly protected me.
Every time this topic comes up, right, on how we, like, to me, it's a lot of censorship. And I'm sure you felt the same way, that you had to fit this figure, right? Like, put on this mask of what an HR professional should be versus who you authentically are at that time.
Yeah. Fit in a profile.
Yeah.
Job description, person specification, and I would tick them all because I molded into the mask so well. But, you know, kind of like constriction, censorship, restricted myself, all of those words, you know, resonate with me so much. But at the time, it suited me so well, because it allowed me to continue to play the game even longer. Because I carried so much shame from my childhood, I never wanted anyone to find out who I was behind the mask. So here we are, voila. I'm in HR, and I'm fitting this corporate, you know, I'm playing the game and I'm fitting this corporate profile. So it was perfect for me at the time.
You talk about the shame of your childhood. Would you say there were people-pleasing tendencies for you as a child?
Absolutely. Because if you're in an you're in an abusive, and this was kind of like physically and emotionally abusive, if you're in an abusive environment, you'll do anything to stop it. So as a child, you know, all I wanted was love. All I wanted was a hug. All I wanted was to be looked after and smiled at and told I was amazing. And if I didn't get it naturally, I sought it. So, you know, whereas mothers would naturally kind of like cuddle their child or tell them they're beautiful, you know, mine didn't. She abused me. So I would make extra effort to people please her as a 4-year-old, 5-year-old.
Yeah.
So I could get that validation back.
Wow.
And then when I didn't get it, and then that carried on into my adulthood.
Yeah.
Because I was so unsure of who I was, I then, you know, these people-pleasing tendencies carried on into my 20s and my 30s.
Yeah.
So everyone else was all right. You know, listening HR, that's the job, isn't it? Service to others. You know, listening to friends talk about themselves endlessly. And then when it would come to me, it's like, oh no, I'm fine.
Yeah. How do you think that carried out into your interactions, maybe with coworkers or supervisors in the corporate space?
Well, I was in the right job. I was in the right job. I worked very hard. I would take on additional stuff. Um, I would have no boundaries. I would maybe work at a weekend. So if somebody sent me an email, I wouldn't think twice. I could literally wake up, turn on my phone, or sometimes, bring my laptop into my bed and reply to emails on a weekend, because that will look good, won't it? They'll think I'm good if I do that. So non-existent boundaries.
Yeah.
People would come to your desk and say, "Oh, can I talk to you?" It will only take 10 minutes. And of course, it takes an hour, and then the rest of your work is behind. So yeah, my boundaries at work really suffered, but my kind of like my work ethic and my output and my productivity was A1.
Yeah. Yeah. Would you say that when it came to maybe toxic people that you worked with, like that would just treat you like crap, right? Did you find yourself trying to do more for them to kind of win them over and not stick in? This goes along with the mask, right? And the authenticity and using your own voice, not using your own voice to say this is wrong or don't talk to me like that.
Yeah, I mean, the funny thing is, just when you were saying that, at the time, they weren't toxic to me because it was an environment I was used to.
Yeah.
So they weren't toxic. That was normal, because that was the environment, that was the upbringing I had. So they weren't toxic. And to me, they were just people who I needed to continue to please, to make sure that they were okay. And it was just, these were just individuals, these were just normal people, and I was the one who needed to kind of like keep myself small to kind of appease them and look after them.
Wow. Wow. This is something that I just ran into recently with a client, and then also with like a conversation totally outside of what I do. Just with somebody else I was having a conversation with, talking about how bad sometimes like your supervisor will continuously throw stuff at you. And then there's like this fear factor of what if I don't deliver?
Yeah.
And when you ask people, but what if you would say no? What if you would say, don't talk to me like that? What would happen?
Yeah.
There's no reaction. They have no clue because they're so accustomed to, like, that's normal for them, like you said, right?
Absolutely. And
Wow.
and I did. There's always a reason. Oh, it must have been a bad day. I know he's really stressed right now. Don't take it personally. He's got a lot on his plate at the
Yeah.
moment. Or she's having some personal stuff going on. So, always trying to smooth it over and iron it out. And I think at that stage, I mean, you say about kind of like saying anything. I didn't know how to say anything because I didn't have a voice. My voice was so pushed down. It almost like felt that if I'd tried, it had been a little squeak at the bottom of my, diaphragm, and you wouldn't have heard it because it was so pushed down and so suppressed that I wouldn't have said anything because I wouldn't have known how to.
Wow. So let's talk about that experience for you and how we can help people that are listening, because you and I both know this is a huge need inside the corporate world and outside the corporate world. So hopefully what we talk about today can definitely make a difference in some lives moving forward. Let's just go there. So when you're working with your clients, how do you help them with gaining their voice, finding their authentic self, right? Becoming visible, taking up space. Let's talk about it.
And I'm glad you asked that question, because it's that word, isn't it? Authenticity. And it's used so much that I think it's important kind of like to really understand, what it means. And I think for me, the biggest thing is, and when I work with my clients, is about kind of being honest with yourself first and others. And I think it's about kind of like owning your shit, because it's so easy, isn't it, to point the finger and say, he's a bad boss. This is a toxic environment. She's a horrible team member. And all of those things do exist. And there are some blooming horrendous environments, and some micromanagers and some bullies and, people who really expect too much from you. But I think the most important thing is to actually take a deep look inside first. And that's what I get my clients to do. If you're choosing to stay in the environment, and that's my first question to them, what would you like to do? Am I working with you to stay in this corporate environment, or are we working together to leave? Whatever you want to do, it's your choice. But based on that, it's about taking a deep look inside yourself and saying, how am I showing up inside? How am I showing up in all of this? And what's my part? So number one, I think authenticity means being honest with yourself. I think it's also about kind of putting your hand up and owning your mistakes and learning from them. A key thing for my clients is actually being able to express their thoughts and their feelings. And that's a toughie, though, because I think that it's okay to say, we use the word vulnerability a lot, and encourage more people to be vulnerable, but the environment itself has to be receptive to that, because you don't want to say, I'm having a really shit day, and you cry in a meeting, as I have done, and the environment isn't supportive for that, because then, what are you left with? And then another big thing for me is authenticity is about being in alignment with their values.
Yeah.
And accepting who they are. And as I say, all these things, I was none of them.
Yeah.
At the start. So that's the type of conversations I have with my clients, in terms of, do they want to stay there? And if so, how can we make it the most productive environment for them? And it all starts from within.
That inward journey is definitely something that when I made, the knee-jerk decision to leave the corporate world with absolutely no plan, I didn't realize that I would be going on that journey. And that's where a lot of my discovery took place.
Yeah.
So I left because I knew that there wasn't a values alignment anymore, but I didn't know that I had lost myself.
Yeah.
In those 18 years. Quite honestly, I didn't know that I had lost my voice. I always looked at myself as someone that would stand up for what was right. But definitely I was censoring myself, right? And not being authentic, and at times not being visible, because I just wanted to fly under the radar.
Yes, that's it, isn't it? That's exactly what it is. I think you've hit the nail on the head there. Keep yourself low, keep yourself small, do everything that is asked, and then I won't get into trouble.
Yes. And so I remember so many people saying that, like, I don't want to do amazing things. I just want to fly under the radar, get through my day, and go home.
Yeah.
And just what you said, like, you're keeping yourself small if that's you.
Yeah.
So if you're at a point in your career where you're saying that, and maybe you've been saying it for a long time, use this as a little bit of a reflection time for you, right? Like, listen to this podcast and then take some time to reflect on that. And why is it that you want to fly under the radar? Why is it
Yeah.
that you're keeping yourself small? And maybe you don't look at it that way, but there's something else underlying there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you
And
and
then,
I had talked before about it's like peeling back the layers of an onion, right? It's the same thing when you start
yeah.
doing that internal work.
Yeah. And for me, kind of the phrase that I use is kind of like unbecoming and unbecoming, becoming. Because it's that peeling off the layers and getting rid of all the stuff, all the messages that you hold, all the beliefs that you hold that actually aren't yours, that aren't yours. They never were yours. It's like picking up the wrong suitcase at the airport and you've been carrying it around with you 5-10 years, and it's all those messages, the messages of not good enough, the messages of what I have to say is not important, if I say what I think people will laugh at me, all those messages that you may be having that are keeping you hidden and under the radar. But I think
Yeah.
the values thing, like you said, for me and for my clients, is huge. What are your top values? And my biggest one was freedom.
Yeah.
So obviously, that's when I left. But I recognize that not everyone can leave. But to do the values work, I think is so important. Think about your top 3-5 values.
And if you have a hard time figuring out what your values are, and I know that
Yeah.
might sound silly for the two of us to talk about because we've done that work, but when you're in that state of like being stuck in this cycle and this is all you probably don't know what your values are.
Yeah.
Right. So for me, I often tell my clients, like, start with listing out the things that you resent about the work that you're doing.
Yeah.
And that typically will help you figure out what your values are
Yeah.
and help you start from a place of, okay, here's where I need to make some change.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And then also on the other side, what activities set your soul on fire and for what reason? And for me, I mean, that was stuff, like my running, my travel, being out in nature. And why? And that's when I kept on coming back to the word freedom
Yeah.
for me. So I like that, kind of like what you resent about your work and what sets your soul on fire. And some of those activities could be work related, of course.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's a good idea for people to think out of the box and not just focus, on the work environment. 3-5 of their top values. And you can also, Google it, can't you? You can Google kind of like value worksheets, and you'll find those, and just kind of like, go through it, take some quiet time and circle, which ones resonate the most. And of course, you're going to start off with 10 or 15, and then just really kind of like keep on kind of like, reducing the number.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's important work.
So let's talk a little bit more about visibility. So we've just kind of uncovered some of the blocks to that, right? And some things that people, why you get stuck in flying under the radar, so to speak. So what is it that you recommend, like first steps for someone to take, other than that we just talked about values, but like next steps from there to build on that? How do they become visible?
So first of all, what does visibility mean to them? What's important for them? Because if you remember back at when we both started, HR, visibility then probably meant like walking the floor, didn't it? You'd say to your CEO or your head of business, whoever you were supporting, you need to be more visible. Okay, how can I do that? Well, you need to walk the floor, don't you? So people can see you. And then I think it changed a bit to kind of like, playing the game and playing the office politics to get yourself promoted. But for me, visibility is about, I don't think it's any of that anymore. It's about, having those difficult conversations, saying no, perhaps saying yes when you want to hide. putting in place boundaries with kind of like family, friends, work, your boss. Look at that list and think about one small step that you could take. Think about what visibility means to you. It might be something else that we haven't mentioned, and then think of one small thing that you could do. It may be not picking up the phone on a Friday night when perhaps your boss calls, 5:30, and you've already switched your computer off. And I can imagine that would be maybe scary as heck to some people. But it's just about, doing these small steps and just trying one thing.
Yeah. Yeah. When I think of visibility in the corporate setting, I think a lot of people, it's same thing, right now with the online space, people will talk about, you need to be visible, you need to be visible. And it's so draining sometimes to take it from the perspective of like being out there and like constantly give. For me in the corporate setting, like I think about becoming visible for me at that time would be like not be the pushover.
Yeah.
So I felt like for me, running a retail operation, running a store, and when things started to get so micromanaged that like, why am I even here? So being visible at that point for me would have been standing in my power, using my voice,
Yeah.
and making sure that my team knew that they were supported.
Yeah.
Right? Like as like me as their leader, I'm here to support you versus just shrug my shoulders and say, this is what we have to do. This is what so-and-so told me.
Yeah. Yeah. Because we've always done it that way.
Yeah.
And not challenging and pushing back. Oh, I'll do it because he told me or she told me to do it. And it's actually always been done like that. So, let's do it. Let's not rock the boat. Let's keep under the radar.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. This is such a good conversation.
But it's interesting what you say about the online space. I think it's a great analogy because it is right, isn't it? It's kind of like be more visible as an entrepreneur, as a coach. And to one person, it might mean I'm going to show up on LinkedIn twice a week. But to somebody else, being visible means literally being visible every single day, including weekends. Show up on LinkedIn or on Facebook or on Instagram, or whatever your kind of like container is, every single day. So I think the most important thing is for the client or for people listening is what does it mean to you?
Yeah. And what feels good.
Yeah.
Not what somebody's telling you should do.
Yeah.
If that feels like it's sucking your soul out, like you're doing this for the wrong reason.
Absolutely. And it has to feel comfortable. It has to feel safe to you and your nervous system. That's why it's so important to do these small steps. Otherwise, you'll kind of like send your nervous system into a complete dysregulated state because you'll be so anxious. Think about what it means to you and then do something small. And then pause and see how that feels. Because sometimes we're so scared, aren't we? We're so scared, we're so terrified that we actually don't do anything because we worry about what might happen. But at the end of the day, you're not in danger.
Yeah.
You're not going to get jumped on by a tiger. You're not in any danger. It's just fear. And it's your body, it's your nervous system doing exactly what it's supposed to do, keeping you safe.
Yeah, man. And that's something too I've learned on my becoming journey, right? My unbecoming and becoming journey, that you don't realize when you're living in that constant state of stress, that it's just your body, like that's your body's response to try to keep you safe.
Yes. It's doing a fabulous job.
Yeah. Thank you,
it's doing
body.
a fabulous job, isn't it? It's doing exactly what it says on the tin.
Yep.
but I mean, it comes with so many downsides because you continue to play small. Nobody kind of, no one knows who you are. Nobody sees your gifts, but you do stay exactly where you do stay in your zone of familiarity, and nothing changes. But at least you're not kind of, in a state of complete. Hyper arousal. So it's about choosing. It's about making a decision. Do I actually want something to be different? Do I want to continue hiding and playing small? Because no one actually gets to see your brilliance and your uniqueness. Because that's your superpower.
Yeah.
And no one is you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's what, we lose that sense of self sometimes when we are in this environment that is a very cookie cutter approach. You're not like the lady sitting at the next desk in the next cubicle.
Yes.
You're just not.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember it was funny when I started to think about when things started to feel a bit out of sorts. People would say to me, talk about this cookie cutter approach, this profile of HR that you've got to fit. And I'm a very fun, I'm very energetic. I love humor. I love laughing. I love doing things a bit differently sometimes. And people would say to me, who are not HR colleagues, but people would say to me outside of work, like even my run club, you really aren't typical HR, And I think when people started to say that, I realized, things started to shift inside, and there was this uncomfortableness, a bit like, when you wring your clothes out, and it started to feel a bit kind of like tight. And then I started to realize that the face mask, the clay face mask with the cucumbers, was shifting, and it was no longer doing its job.
Yeah. Was that uncomfortable for you? Like when you were in that unbecoming phase, how was that for you?
Oh my God. It was so uncomfortable because I was shedding off layers of me. I mean, because this skin of mine had been so tightly wrapped for so many years. And then I started to feel really uncomfortable, and it was like, what the heck is going on? And I'd obviously started my my therapy and my coaching journey by then, and things started to shift. And when I stopped doing things like stop picking up the phone, stop answering emails, stop listening to my friends go on for 745 hours about the same boyfriend problem that they'd had for the past 6 years. So uncomfortable, and I felt a lot of guilt that I shouldn't be doing this, that I was doing something bad, and that I was bad. So the shame, because I started putting in these personal and professional boundaries, and it was like, oh my gosh, this feels a little bit uncomfortable.
To say the least, right?
To say the least.
To say the least. And I found, it was very similar for me. I felt like I was a total shitty friend for not wanting to like listen to the gossip and the drama, right? And having those boundaries to give myself space, but I wasn't too sure what I was going to fill that space with. I just knew that I needed it, right? Like there was just like this tugging on my heart that I needed that space because I didn't have it for so long. And when you allow yourself to have that space, like in trust that everything is going to fall into place, right? Like whatever is meant to fall into that space is going to, has just been so amazing for me because it's like I've learned to enjoy things that I took for granted before, or just didn't enjoy before because my brain was too busy thinking about work.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny what you said in terms of all this space and not knowing what to do with it. But it was about taking care of you,
Oh yeah.
isn't it? But that sounds like, well, what do I do with all this spare time? And it's,
Yep.
how about turn it inwards and start, giving yourself all the love and the care that you've spent so many years giving to everybody else.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I remember one of the first days that I was like, I just feel like crap, so I'm going to go take a nap. And I felt like this major guilt, like, oh my God, you've got to be doing something. And
Yes.
just allowing myself that space to rest
Yeah.
that my body needed, right? Like I need that physically and mentally. And it's like your mind starts to tell you that you're a terrible person because of that.
Yes.
And you're
Yes.
not. Like, just hear that. You're not. When you give yourself that space and you put those boundaries in place for things, you're not a terrible person.
Yes.
You're stepping into your power, right? You're
That's
stepping
it.
into your authentic self.
Yes. Yeah. You're stepping into the real you,
Yeah.
who's been hidden for so many years with the expectations of other people, being a mother, being a wife, being a husband, being a partner, looking after everybody else.
Yes.
Absolutely. There's absolutely nothing wrong with you. But you've almost like been so I've used the phrase before, square peg in a round hole for so long that you actually don't know what real is.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I have, I've met people since I left the corporate environment, ex-HR colleagues, and people have said to me, and not always in a complimentary way, what's happened to you? As if I've had like a lobotomy. What's happened to you? And I recognize it's uncomfortable for people. It's uncomfortable because because they were so used to you or me being a certain way that they don't recognize this Noelle or the Amanda. And and that's okay. That's not my problem to solve.
Yeah. Absolutely.
That's for them to deal with. And I think you find that when you go on this becoming journey, there will be people who will love this new, real you, the authentic you, and there'll be others who actually drop off. And I don't know about you, but I have kept some friends, gained some new friends, but also lost some.
Yeah. Not everyone's going to follow you into every season of life.
Yeah.
And I remember hearing that for the first time, and that was really hard for me. It was when I was going through my divorce, but I was still in corporate, right? So I remember like, oh, that's kind of harsh. It's kind of harsh. That person's just trying to make me feel good about what's going on in my life right now. And it's so true now that I have, gone on that journey of unbecoming and becoming. And it's a new season.
Yeah. And it's a
So
beautiful new season. It's like having an empty field or a field full of weeds. And then all of a sudden you plant these new seeds and all you see is kind of like a field full of like tulips or roses.
yeah.
All that color and how vibrant it all is and how alive it all feels. And that's how it feels, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So for those of you that are listening and you're like, I have been wearing a mask for way too long, what's your biggest piece of advice for them?
How is this mask benefiting me? What is it about myself that I feel a need to hide? And, what would happen if I do use my voice? And, as usual, Amanda, when I have these conversations with you, because I can see where I've been, it just sends shivers down my body because it was such a journey for me. And I'm not going to say that I wasted time with the mask, because it actually suited me at the time and it kept me safe when I needed it. And it served a purpose, and I don't regret any of that, and I don't believe that I don't call any of that mistakes or failures. I don't use any of those words. But when I talk about it now, it was such a massive journey for me that I just people are listening. I would just love them to explore with some of those questions. Just journal. Just start journaling. Piece of paper. Get yourself a fancy little notebook and just start journaling. And I think, and for me, I used to do a lot of kind of like writing, and you just write and write and write and write. And then when you actually go back and look at it, maybe 2 months later, 3 months later, 6 months later, you think, wow, how things have changed. And it could be something very, very simple, like putting in a boundary, with a family member. Say no to your mother, that you're going to go up there for Christmas or for Thanksgiving. It could be something so simple, but it makes such a huge change in your life. And I think when you write it all down and then you look back and you can think, wow, so proud of myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So just as you're sitting here, saying that, my mind immediately went to all the times in corporate that we would dig in and root cause an issue in the business.
Right.
But we don't do it for ourselves.
Right.
Right. So like, you probably already have this skill and you probably are like, I do this all the time. So I think for me, like I always, I love doing, I think it was called like the 5 whys, right? So you'd always just constantly ask yourself why till you got to the root cause. Like it's the same thing on this journey. So
Yes.
if you feel like you've been not using your voice, not being visible, whatever visible might mean to you at this point in your life or your career, and feel like you might be wearing this mask, do that exercise.
Yes.
Whatever it is that you do right now to kind of root cause, do that for yourself. It's the same thing on your personal growth. And quite honestly, the return on that time spent is going to be so much more profound than sitting there doing that for someone else's business.
Yes. That is so brilliant. You've hit the nail on the head there. You've already got the tools. You use them every day for the business, but yet you wouldn't think of actually doing it on your own life. And just as you said that, you use the term root cause analysis, SWOT analysis, the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. I actually did do that when I was deciding to leave corporate and move back to the UK.
Wow.
The tools are there.
Yeah. You're using them. You're using them probably every day, multiple times a day. It's just second nature to you. Yeah.
And confidently presenting back the data to your leaders, to the manager, about why we should do something. So turn the tables on yourself and get your own data. It's just data, isn't it? Just data. And then you choose what to do with it.
Yeah. It's not something that you sit there and judge.
No.
Right. Nope. So if you're journaling and maybe you don't typically journal, it's very easy for your mind to start judging what you're writing. And you have to put that judgment aside and just let it flow, because that is when like you really can make progress.
Yes. Yeah. I bet you don't. Absolutely no judgment. It's just numbers. It's just data. I assume that when we do our root cause analysis at work, we don't judge the data. It's like, oh, here we are. We've got some challenges here, but it is what it is. So, adopt the same kind of like methodology and approach to your own, to your own life. That's brilliant.
Man. Okay. So, any last thoughts?
I don't know, why is it that whenever I talk with you, I always want to kind of like, I always feel like I need a little cry.
I know. I'm telling you.
it kind of like, I get this warm feeling when I just think about, the work that I do with my clients and the work that I've done myself already, and how amazingly beneficial it is. And if you do, shine that spotlight on yourself, and you come up with this amazing insight, it doesn't mean you have to do something with it now if you're not quite ready for it, but the data is there. So, just start asking yourself some powerful questions, and just go exploring and see, and see what you find.
Absolutely. And you know what? When you do this exercise, for those of you listening, I know that Noelle and I would love to hear what you take away from that.
Yeah.
So, we love making impact in the world.
Yeah.
And even if that impact is having you sit down and do that root cause analysis, and like really be able to take time and reflecting on your personal journey and what's really going on inside of you, we would love to hear that. So just make sure in the show notes, I will have ways to connect with us. And we would love to hear from you. So Noelle, thank you again for coming on. I know this will not be the last time. I keep saying that because I enjoy this so much. And for anyone listening, challenge yourself today to like give yourself that space and do that internal reflection, right? Do the 5 whys, the root cause analysis, the SWOT analysis, whatever you're comfortable with. And let's really see how that helps you break through that mask, step into your true authentic self, and start using your voice. And it might be the blossoming of a new season in your life. And, we're recording this right now at, towards the middle end of January. And I think this is just such a great time for people to do that reflection, because we're going to be, going into spring, and spring is all about blooming. So how can you bring in that new season just by doing this one thing?
Yeah. How can you plant more daisies in your life?
Yeah, absolutely.
How appropriate for spring, hey?
Yes.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Noelle, thank you as always.
Thank you, my lovely.
So, are you ready to start your own corporate detox journey? Well, if you are, make sure that you check out amandamccorder.net for different ways to work with me, as well as some freebies that could help you get started. If you're on social media, follow me at Amanda K. McCorder on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram.